One of the most iconic sites in the whole world is without doubt Red Square in the centre of Moscow. Here's a simple guide of what you'll see if you ever get to go there, or if you're just curious to see what it looks like. Hello, my name is Joe Baker and I'm a Belfast-born historical tour guide, and over the years, last 30 years almost, I have been conducting tours not only throughout Ireland but throughout Britain, throughout Europe, and believe it or not, throughout Russia. Now, this all started quite by accident, to be honest with you, and it's something that it's a subject I'm going to cover in a later video, because it really is a fascinating story of how I came to bring tourists from Ireland and Britain to Russia and to bring them around. And fascinating job, absolutely love it. And unfortunately, over the last 18 months, we haven't been anywhere near it, because every single one of our tours has been cancelled due to the ongoing COVID-19 situation throughout the world. Because of the coronavirus situation, the thing that has affected us the most is our tours being cancelled. And we had quite a number of tours booked for 2020, and we had quite a few booked for this year, 2021, and all have been moved to 2022. And because of that, what that means is that the bookings that we had for 2020, the bookings we had for 2021 had to all be moved to 2022, and that includes doing the tours that were booked for 2022. So next year is going to be a hell of a busy year. Because of that, it also has a roll-on effect, because it means that all the advanced bookings for 2023 onwards, for example, are all pushed back, and a lot of people who were looking forward to going on our tours unfortunately won't be able to do them now for at least 2 or 3 years. But what I hope to do with these series of videos is that instead of you going on our tours, we're going to bring the tours to you. And what we're going to do is we're going to start with our tours throughout Russia, because we do quite a few, and they're mainly to Moscow, to St. Petersburg, and to Volgograd, which is better known to a lot of people as Stalingrad. And what we're going to do is make a series of videos, short videos. They're not going to be too long or too boring, and it's just basically, if you have any plans to go, to show you what to go and see, what to do, and how to get to go to these places. And as I says, they're all going to be a series of short videos, which I think a lot of people, even if you're not going, will find quite interesting. And so, because of the whole COVID situation and the problems that it's caused a lot of us, including ourselves, our aim with these short videos is actually quite simple, because what we're going to do is, instead of bringing you on our tours, we're going to bring our tours to you. And they're not going to be long, boring things, so don't be thinking that. What they are going to be is a whole series of short videos looking at different aspects of different parts of history. And for these ones, we're going to look at Moscow, and we're going to explore, without doubt, the most famous site in Moscow, which is Red Square itself. Now, Red Square is slap bang right in the centre of Moscow, so it really can't be missed, and it's quite easy to get to. All public transport goes there, the metro goes there, and of course taxis will bring you there. But depending on where you're staying, it's actually quite easy to walk to, because as I said, it's right in the middle, and if you're staying within the city centre region, then you should be able to walk to it easy enough. Now, if you approach the Red Square from the centre of Moscow, you really can't miss it, because as you approach, on the one side is the massive structure, which is the Kremlin, and the Kremlin is going to be the subject of our next video, for looking around the Kremlin and looking around the area all around it. Now, whenever you approach Red Square, you come to the two large red brick buildings, and on the right hand side one, that is the Russian State Historical Museum, well worth a visit, but we'll touch on that later. And on the other side is the Museum of the First Great Patriotic War, which is basically the defeat of Napoleon in 1812. Now, in between those two buildings, you'll see a small twin tower structure with a small chapel at the centre of it. And whenever you come to this area, that is exactly what you want to head for. You'll see the small chapel, head straight for that. When you'll get there, you'll usually see people gathered around, and it's a bit of a tourist attraction and a bit of an attraction. It brings the locals out too, particularly the elderly people. Well, not the elderly, but the Babaruskas who are looking to earn a few pounds. And what it is you'll notice a circular bronze plaque on the ground, and what that is that's known as Kilometre Zero, and that is the slap bang middle of Moscow. That is the very heart of Moscow, and it's from that all measurements, to all the different Russian cities and towns and places are all measured from. So that is the very, very centre. Now, there's a bit of a tradition, and what you do is that you stand in the centre of it, and you have to get a small coin and toss it over. I think it's your right shoulder, but I'm not too sure, so you'll need to double check that whenever you get there. And it's said to do two things. The first one is, of course, to bring you good luck, and the other one is, which I think is the most believable, is that if you do that, then it's an indication that you have a wish for you to come back to Moscow. Now, you're probably going to ask them, what has all the Babaruskas got to do with all this, and all the the homeless people and stuff? Well, what they do is the minute you throw that coin over your shoulder, they make a scramble for it. Now, it's not a pitiful sight, but it is. It's a bit sad. Once you go in through the gates on either side of this small church, that'll be you straight into Red Square, and the first thing that's going to strike you is, of course, St. Basil's Cathedral, because it does tend to stick out a bit. And as I said earlier, it is not only one of the most famous buildings in Russia, it is actually one of the most famous and well-known buildings throughout the whole world. But we'll get to that get to that soon enough. But when we're here, the interesting thing that I always like to point out about Red Square is that different people have different theories as the word got its name. And a lot of people just associate red with the communist regime and stuff like that. But there's actually a good argument for that, because the square next to it is known as People's Revolution Square, so it would make sense. However, if you look at the Russian word for red is krasny, and the Russian word for beautiful is krasny ver, and both of them sound very similar, and there's a bit of a debate that the name comes from it being a beautiful square. So there's a good argument for that as well, but that's just to do with the name. But as soon as you go in, as soon as you enter into Red Square, we're going to look at the buildings sort of in a clockwise direction, if you like, and we're going to look at the buildings that you're immediately going to come to, and the first one you're going to come to is the State Historical Museum, and that'll be the building just to the right of you as you're entering. Now, you can't miss the entrance, because there's usually gentlemen dressed in traditional Russian garb outside it, and they'll get you into the ticket office. And it's one place I highly recommend going, because it's a beautiful building on the outside, and on the inside it is just as stunning and well worth a visit. Now, within it, there's just countless items to see. There's relics ranging from prehistoric times right up until the modern times, and these include all sorts of material from the Soviet period, and even priceless artworks from the Romanov dynasty. The museum itself was founded in 1872, and when this was done, it was decorated in the Russian Revival style by well-known famous Russian artists at that period, whose names I'm not even going to attempt. But during the Soviet period, all this artwork was regarded as gaudy, and every bit of it was plastered over, which, when you think about it, it's a tragic thing to do. But fortunately, what had happened is in 1986, they began a painstaking restoration program, and during that there they exposed the artwork again, and it was so painstaking it took 10 years. Now this museum is well worth visiting. It is you could easily spend quite a few hours there, because there's over 4.5 million items in the museum collection. So I think you'll agree that that would take some time to go around, but obviously you're not going to, because I mean something like that is I think it's one of the largest coin collections in the world is included, which is 1.5 million. So you're not going to go around and look at every single coin, but it's well worth a visit. The building is beautiful on the inside as it is on the outside, and definitely can't recommend it highly enough. As soon as you leave the History Museum, you're taken back out onto Red Square, and whenever you do so, the first interesting building you'll come across is what must be the smallest cathedral in the world, because it just looks like a wee prayer chapel, but it's actually a cathedral, and its full title is the Cathedral of Our Lady of Kazan. And whenever you look at it, you would just automatically assume that that wee building is centuries old, but believe it or not, it's not. Because what had happened was that the original church, which dated back to the 16th, 17th century, was demolished in 1932 on the orders of Stalin. And what Stalin wanted to do was to clear Red Square of all religious buildings so that he could have his military parades basically up and down it. Now, there's a lot of visitors who would just automatically ask, then, how come St Basil's Cathedral is still slap bang in the middle of Red Square? And St Basil's Cathedral actually survived by the skin of its teeth, and it was through a lot of persuasion from the people who were employed to do the task of this church clearance, and they had rightly pointed out that St Basil's was an iconic symbol of Russia, and therefore must be kept. So Stalin agreed, and St Basil's survived. But the small Kazan church didn't survive. It was demolished, and I think it was the site was a building relating to International Communist Youth or something like that. But in turn it was demolished, and the small church or cathedral was rebuilt. And when it was rebuilt exactly the way it was. So credit where credit's due to the people behind this. And what they've basically done was they got the old plans, they got the old paintings, drawings, etc. of the church, and rebuilt it exactly how it was. And whenever you look at it today, you'll agree they done one hell of a remarkable job. Directly next to the cathedral is one of Moscow's main shopping streets, and there's basically everything that you could want in that one street. And the street concludes with a shopping arcade that, let's just say, the vast majority of us will not be shopping at it, because unless you have a spare £2 or £3 million laying about, you'll not be shopping up at that arcade. But it's a street we'll be returning to. We're not just skipping it here, and it's one of the places that we'll be returning to in a future video. Talking about high-end shopping, that will bring us to the first of the iconic buildings which are situated on Red Square, and this of course is the GUM department store. Now, if like me you've no interest in shopping, you really must visit this place, because it is just as stunning inside as what it is outside. And as soon as you go in, the first thing you'll notice, of course, is that it's all the high-end shops, but it really is a beautiful, spectacular building. And the whole thing is, glass roofs and balconies, and it really is stunning. And as soon as you walk in, you'll notice that it's in three parts. It has the large central arcade, and then there's two smaller arcades on either side, and slap bang in the middle of all this is a massive water feature, a massive water fountain, which alone is worth just going in to see. Now, for the ladies, this is going to be an absolute paradise, but if you do intend to shop in it, the only thing I would suggest is make sure you bring plenty of money, because as I said, it's all the high-end stores. But what I like about it is not only the beauty of the building, but one of my favorite features of it is that they have maintained a lot of the original character. And if you're going downstairs, one of the most unusual sights you'll see is this sign for historical toilet. And I remember first seeing it and wondering what the hell's that. But basically what it is, they've kept the old original 19th century toilets, and believe it or not, they're actually still in use. But believe me, there's more modern toilets throughout the rest of the complex. But as I said, the thing that I like the most is that it was in the Soviet times. It was a real Soviet, shopping area, and they have kept quite a few of the old Soviet shops within it as museum pieces. Not, you can't go in and shop in them obviously, but they're all small museum pieces showing you what the original shops look like. And I think that's a brilliant idea. And once you go into it, I would suggest that you spend an hour or two and walk around the whole thing and look for the wee Soviet shops, because you'll find them absolutely fascinating. Now, having spent a bit of time in the GUM department store, there are quite a few exits, and one of the main ones will leave you straight back out into Red Square. And this of course brings us to what must be not only the most iconic building on Red Square, but the most iconic building in the whole of Russia, and that is of course St. Basil's Cathedral. And anytime we see anything reported from Moscow or from Russia, or anything that the big bad Russians are getting up to, they always show St. Basil's Cathedral. And they show St. Basil's Cathedral in the belief that a lot of people think that it's a Kremlin, but it's not the Kremlin. It's directly next door to the Kremlin. But please don't make that mistake. It's St. Basil's Cathedral, not the Kremlin. The cathedral itself was built in 1555 by Ivan the Terrible, who sounds like a friendly chap. And there's a bit of a myth that he was so impressed with the building, and that the building was so beautiful, that the architect, he had him blinded. I find that hard to believe, because there's so many of these similarly styled churches throughout Russia. And if you go to St. Petersburg, for example, the Cathedral on Spilled Blood is almost identical. So I think that's a bit of a myth. However, it is a beautiful building. It is a beautiful cathedral, and although it was the Russian Orthodox Church, it is today a museum. And I believe that when it was seized by the communists some years ago, it is still in government hands, but it's no longer a functioning church. It is indeed a museum, and visitors are more than welcome to go inside. The first thing you'll notice about it is it's made up of all these what's known as onion domes, and very brightly coloured, but each one of those is a small chapel. And if I can remember right, St. Basil's is made up of eight of these small chapels, with the ninth being the central one. So whenever you get in, what you're actually doing is you're visiting each of these small chapels. And to be honest with you, I find it more impressive from the outside than I do from the inside. But whenever you're watching these videos, you'll find that I make a lot of comments like that, and it's something that you just have to experience for yourself. But I would recommend going in to visit it. But just remember that there's a lot of cathedrals and churches throughout Moscow that you can go into, which are 10 times more impressive and which are completely free. But for the meantime, and for this purpose of this video, we're at St. Basil's, and we're now leaving St. Basil's to come back out onto Red Square. Once there, we'll next see one of the most famous buildings in the world again, which of course is the Moscow Kremlin. Now, the Moscow Kremlin is something I'm going to be covering in the next video, so I'll not be saying too much about it here, other than to say that there's the beautiful towers of the Kremlin are situated, the most main ones are situated in Red Square, and you'll notice that they're massive and topped of course with the very famous glass red stars. But believe it or not, this is the back of the Kremlin. This is not the front. And as I says, in the next video we're going to be looking at the Kremlin, how to go into it, and of course to go in through the main entrance, which is at the other side of where Red Square is. So that'll be something to look forward to. And so this brings us to another iconic site in Red Square, and one which is quite unique, not only in Moscow or Russia, but throughout the world. And what this is the Lenin Mausoleum. And basically what it is what it sounds like. It is the burial place of Vladimir Lenin, the communist leader who was the founder of the Soviet Union, who died in 1924. Now, Lenin didn't get a normal burial that most of us are used to. What he got was preserved, and whenever you go into it, you can go in and see his body, and whenever you look at the body, it actually, you would think he was sleeping, but you can't go into it. And the only thing that I would warn about here is that quite often there is quite a long queue, but the good thing is the queue actually moves pretty quickly, so don't be put off if you see the queue right down to the bottom of the street, because it moves very quickly, and the purpose of the queue is really for security. It's just to allow the guards to check your baggage and to just carry out a quick scan, walking through an x-ray machine. So don't be put off by the queue, and just wait. It's a sight worth getting in to see, because, as I said, it's the preserved remains of the Soviet leader Lenin himself. So something that you must do in your tick box to say that you've seen it. Once you get into the mausoleum, you're not allowed to stop, and you have to keep moving to go through it. And basically it's a walk around his preserved remains. You're certainly not allowed to take a photograph, and you're certainly not allowed to take selfies, and there's guards inside who will make sure that you don't do any of that. Coming out of it, you are then at the Kremlin Walls, the famous part where all the Soviet dignitaries all lie buried, and there's quite a few famous people there. Of course, there's the grave of Stalin. When Stalin died in 1953, he was also placed in the mausoleum with Lenin. And it was just later afterwards, whenever Khrushchev done his de-Stalinization, that he was removed and placed in a grave directly behind the mausoleum. But it's actually one of the most well-visited graves in the whole area, and quite often you'll go around and you'll see absolutely hundreds of red roses on the grave of Stalin, but very few on the graves of the others. He's a controversial figure, we all know that, and there's two ways of looking at him. The first is, of course, of all the horrific deeds that he had done while he was the Soviet leader, and the other is that you have to remember that this is the man who almost single-handedly defeated Hitler's Nazi Germany, because we need to remember that although in the West we're led to believe that it was the Americans and the British who defeated Hitler, it wasn't, because the vast majority of German casualties were in the East, and this was all led by Stalin. So a pretty bad boy on one hand, but a good boy in another. So, as I said, he's a controversial figure, and of course everybody will have their own opinions of him, but for the purpose of this here, it's one of the graves that you can't see at the back of Lenin's mausoleum. For me personally, one of the graves that I always insist on visiting every time I'm in Moscow is, once again, it's behind the Lenin mausoleum, and this time it's behind the grave of Stalin as well. And what that is the grave of Yuri Gagarin. And Yuri Gagarin basically is the first man in space, the first person ever to leave planet Earth. And a lot of people believe that he is the one who won the space race for the Soviet Union when he done this in April 1961. But you have to remember that he did not win the space race. What actually happened was that the space race was run once again by the Soviet Union, but this was in 1957 when the Soviets had launched the Sputnik satellite, which was the first man-made object to circle the Earth and to orbit the Earth. So that was the point that the Soviets had won the space race, and not with Gagarin's remarkable achievement in 1961. Growing up in the West, we're once again led to believe that the space race was run by the United States when they landed on the moon in 1969. The Russians had done quite a lot before that. The first satellite, the first man in space, the first woman in space, the first space station, the first spacewalk, etc., etc. So it was won by the Soviet Union, was not won by the United States in 1969. But that's a whole subject that we're going to cover in a future video whenever we start to visit the Moscow Space Museums. Naturally, there's quite a few more graves that are well worth a visit, and it includes a lot of the graves of former Soviet leaders, and these include Brezhnev, Sharonenko, Andropov, and another grave of note is that of Marshal Zhukov, who is the commander that basically defeated Nazi Germany. So they're all worth going and having a look. Once you're finished here, you are led back out onto Red Square, and that concludes our simple guide, and I hope you found it useful. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you, if you're not planning to visit, that it at least give you a bit of an experience of exactly what Red Square looks like. However, if you have visited Red Square or you plan to visit, what I recommend that you do from here is to make your way back down towards the Historical Museum, sticking to the side of the Kremlin, and to go to the other side of the building, because once you're there you'll come to the Alexander Gardens, and the Alexander Gardens are very impressive and something worth seeing. Because once there, the first thing you'll notice is the impressive changing of the guard, and of course it'll give you admittance and entrance into the Kremlin itself, which is something worthwhile doing. To see the video on that, I would just ask people, if you don't mind, to please subscribe to this channel, and although it'll cost you nothing, it'll help us out big time, and it'll help to create more of these videos for you to enjoy. So once you're finished with this one, please subscribe, and you'll be updated not only to the Kremlin one, but to all the other videos that we plan to put up.